Jaya Radha Madhavan Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari. Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari. Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari. Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhavan Kunja Bihari. Jaya Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Privajakacharya Asto Vatartha Tashi Srimad Nitya Leela Pravishna Om His Divine Grace Shulavaya Charan Arvinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Iskan's BVD Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Kantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur Ki Jai Sri Gadadhar Pandit Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Govinda Ki Jai Gaur Premanandi. All glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees. Gaur Premanandi. Hari Bol, Hare Krishna. Welcome everyone to the morning Srimad Bhagavatam class. Today is the Amavasya, the new moon day of this month of Ashad. And this is actually the 108th anniversary of the disappearance back home, back to Godhead, of the great Acharya in our Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. He lived from 1838 until 1914, and we will save some time here in the Bhagavatam class to hear about his glorious life and achievements and his importance in the disciplic succession from Lord Chaitanya. Also, Sri Gadadhar Pandit, Sri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Sri Gadadhar, member of the Panchatattva, an actual incarnation of the internal potency, Srimati Radharani, and a very dear and confidential and important associate of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself. So today is their disappearance day and the proper observation. We're fasting till noon. All right, so we're reading in the Srimad Bhagavatam, the third canto, the chapter entitled The Appearance of Lord Varaha. That's chapter 13. We're reading today verse number 12. Should be made bigger because people can't see it. Shushushanam Mayam Syat Raja Rakshaya Nirpa Bhagavams Te Raja Partur Rishikesho Nutusyati Haram Shushushanam Mayam Syat Praja Rakshaya Nirpa Bhagavams Te Praja Bhartur Rishikesho Nutusyati Haram Shushushanam Mayam Syat Praja Rakshaya Nirpa Bhagavams Te Praja Bhartur Rishikesho Nutushyati Haram Shushushanam Mayam Syat Praja Rakshaya Nirpa Bhagavams Te Praja Bhartur Rishikesho Nutushyati Param, the greatest, Shushushanam, devotional service, mayam, unto me, syat, should be, praja, the living entities born in the material world, rakshaya, by saving them from being spoiled, nirpa, O king, Bhagavan, the personality of Godhead, te, with you, prajabartu, with the protector of the living beings, Rishikesha, the Lord of the senses, Anutushyati, is satisfied. O king, if you give proper protection to the living beings in the material world, that will be the best service for me. When the Supreme Lord sees you to be a good protector of the conditioned souls, certainly the master of the senses will be very pleased with you. We can all say together, O king, if you give proper protection to the living beings in the material world, that will be the best service for me. When the Supreme Lord sees you to be a good protector of the conditioned souls, certainly the master of the senses will be very pleased with you. Report by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. The whole administrative system is arranged for the purpose of going back home, back to Godhead. And Manu is the representative of Brahma. Similarly, all other kings on different planets of the universe are representatives of Manu. The law book for the entire human society is the Manu Samhita, which directs all activities towards the transcendental service of the Lord. Every king, therefore, must know that his responsibility in administration is not merely to exact taxes from the citizens, but to see personally that the citizens under him are being trained in Vishnu worship. Everyone must be educated in Vishnu worship and engaged in devotional service of Rishikesh, the owner of the senses. The conditioned souls are meant not to satisfy their material senses, but to satisfy the senses of Rishikesh, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is the purpose of the complete administrative system. One who knows this secret, as disclosed here in the version of Brahma, is the perfect administrative head. One who does not know this is a show bottle administrator. By training the citizens in the devotional service of the Lord, the head of a state can be free in his responsibility. Otherwise, he will fail in the onerous duty entrusted to him and thus be punishable by the supreme authority. There is no other alternative in the discharge of administrative duty. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmalitam Jena Tasmai Shri Rave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Svayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Svapadanti Ham Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Udapadakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagara Raghadanhan Vidham Tam Sajiva Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Shri Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishaka Vidhamscha. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate. Dibyad Vrindaranya Kalpadrumada Srimad Ratnagara Singhasanasto Srimad Radha Srila Govinda Devo Prestalabi Savyamano Smarami Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Brindavaneshvari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Panamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyas Cha Kripasandubhyeva Cha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktabrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So this is Swayambhuva Manu instructing Brahma instructing Swayambhuva. All right. So this is the beginning of the universe, and the first order of business that Lord Brahma is responsible for is to populate the universe with living entities. So will be mentioned in the next verse, referring again to the Kumaras, and in subsequent verses, Narada Muni. They did not have to execute Varnashram rigidly because they were engaged in direct pure devotional service. So this material world is a place for correction of the living entities who were meant to be in their original position as pure devotees of the Lord, having willfully or deliberately desired separate from that. They come under the influence of the illusory energy where they think that they themselves are the enjoyer of their material mind and senses, which are actually given to them to fulfill their desire by, mentioned here, Rishikesh. Rishikesh means the Lord, Master, and Controller of the senses. This is a very nice meditation for us who are aspiring to come again to our position as pure devotional service. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he would sing, Manasa Deho Deho Yo Kichu More. My body, my mind, my senses, they all belong to you. And the topmost and most intimate form of Krishna, Krishna in Vrindavan, Nanda Kishore. Nanda Kishore, the beautiful youthful son of Maharaj Nanda. Krishna very much likes to be addressed in terms with names that are related to his most beloved devotees. Yashoda Nandana, Gopi Janaranjana, Yamuna Tira Vanachari, etc., etc. This is very purposeful how Prabhupada gave us this chant, which is also by Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, to say before every recitation of Srimad Bhagavatam. Srimad Bhagavatam is the full literary incarnation of Krishna and presented in the most authorized and scientific way by the authorized incarnation, the literary incarnation of the Lord Srila Vyasadeva. We read in the introduction that one who goes systematically through all 12 cantos, step by step, will become a fully self-realized God-conscious soul at the end, and even more than that, will be so fortified and strong in their faith that they will be able to defend themselves against the onslaught of atheists and be able to present the concept of the personality of Godhead to anyone as a concrete fact. The whole administrative system is arranged for the purpose of going back home, back to Godhead. So if we apply that simple statement to everything that we see going on outside of us and keep it in that simple parameter, then everything becomes very easily understandable. Keeping in mind this is the age of Kali Yuga. It's described in one, Srila Prabhupada states in one place that Kali Yuga is there to facilitate the living entities achieving the full bitter fruit of their impious activities. What people are doing, so to speak, getting away with, considering to be normal activities or even praiseworthy activities in this Kali Yuga, would never be done, what to speak of even be thought of in previous ages. For example, having free sexual activities and considering the natural result of pregnancy to be an inconvenience and to make, as they say, abortion free, safe, and legal is the most sinful activity. And one who engages in that is simply opening up free fall into the hellish existence of themselves being aborted life after life in the same way, practically never seeing the light of day again. Such a responsible activity it is to come together to procreate. It's not that the mother or the father or the man and woman have created the child. Authorized Shastra describes right from the moment of conception, when the sperm and the ovum meet and emulsify, at that exact point, higher authority, ordained by the Supreme Lord himself, sends the particular soul who is destined to take shelter of that womb and become the child of that mother and father in that family. Why do we all have different bodily features? It is because of our karma, which is a combination of our previous sukritis and our good deeds and our bad deeds in accord with our different desires. In the material world, there are four main opulences which invariably create the illusion that we are separate from Krishna, that I am the enjoyer, that are bodily beauty, aristocratic standing, so-calledly, in higher society, a more praiseworthy place in society than a so-called lower position. Wealth, opulence, money, accumulation of it, ease of attaining it, access to it, and intelligence or education. So someone who has performed, just like if you've saved money by your previous hard work, then you're going to have more than somebody who didn't save the money and spent it all. So that's the accumulation of good pious activities we see in the Vedic system. Because people are bewildered, they think the goal of life is to go to a higher status, to heavenly planets. There are so many karma khandya rituals which one thinks one will be elevated to a higher position if one follows them rigidly. But that is not the goal of life. Prabhupada describes this is like unintelligent children on a merry-go-round. Up, down, you're up and then you go down. When they've exhausted the results of their pious activities, they again come to this earth planet as human beings from the heavenly planets. And invariably in Kali Yuga, because of the sinful activities, they go down. Bhagavad Gita describes this in many places. Urdvam gachati sattvasta. What is that verse, Arjuna Nanda? Urdvam gachati sattvasta, Raja. And the translation, basically? Yes. Remain on the earthly planet, go down into the animal species of life. Why are there animal species of life? Why are there plants? Why are there trees? Why are there fish? Why are there birds? This is all to facilitate the desires of the living entity. Prabhupada, when he's walking on the beach in mainly Hawaii, not so much in Los Angeles, seeing the young boys, young men surfing, he said they so much want to spend their time in the water, in their next life they will be fish, so they can swim very easily. And they're called surfers, but Prabhupada called them sea sufferers. And of course the fish in the ocean is very, very dangerous, even just walking in shallow, they have these living entities, what are they called? Stonefish. They look like a rock, but if you step on them, they bite you, and they have like deadly poison, which can kill you or like very seriously injure you. Or there was one, what was his name? Steve Irwin, the crocodile chaser from Australia, and he had like all these TV shows, how he's like hugging wild animals, and and he's thinking he's the friend of all the animals. And then on live TV, he's stung by a stingray, and he's dead within a matter of less than an hour or something, So this material world could be a very, very dangerous place if we don't have the knowledge of its purpose and its utility and how to move through it properly. What is the goal? What is the purpose? Just like if we find ourselves wandering in New York City in the middle of the night in a dangerous area, then the most sensible thing would be that I should get out of here and get to a safe place as soon as possible. Whereas if we lose our intelligence or our awareness, or we get amnesia and we're just like wandering around without a clue of who we are, what is our duty, and what we should actually be doing, then we'll very quickly be exploited or put into a very dangerous or even deadly situation. So this material world is like that. If we don't know what the purpose of this material world is, what our goal is to get from point A to point B. Point A is from the point of ignorance, Om Jnanatimirandasya Jananjana Shalakaya. And by the grace of the pure devotees, by the grace of Krishna, Shreya Uttamam, we achieve that we understand what is the ultimate long-term, far-reaching benefit, which is to achieve pure devotional service. Shri Guru Charana Padma, Kevala Bhakti Sadma. By his grace, we cross the ocean of material existence, and Krishna Prapti Yahoite, achieve the mercy of Krishna. That is proper utilization of our intelligence and understanding. So, at great length, Srila Prabhupada is describing what to speak of the duty of everyone, especially the duty of the representative king or president or leader. Today in New York, they're having primary elections for governor and various high-ranking officials, primary. Then they have another one in August, and then the actual election in early November. But here, it's very clear that one who vies for such a post, the motivation should not be, and Prabhupada would like to say, simply tax the citizens. It shouldn't be for mundane exploitation, personal, or worse, collective party politics, which is more or less a collusion of a gang of thieves to exploit the people's resources and assets, practically speaking, drain the lifeblood of the citizens for their own sinister purposes. what to speak of that. But the motivation should be, individually and collectively, is to facilitate everyone to go back home, back to Godhead. And if that is the actual motivation, you can rest assured that 100% such a person is a pious and saintly person and qualified for the post. So that's what we should look at. What is your motivation? Not just to help people, because that could be your own mental concoction or your own illusory idea. Prabhupada, speaking in Bombay in April of 1977, Prabhupada was very, very strong. This was his last public appearance. His illness was coming upon him that would ultimately, at least seemingly, of course the pure devotee is not at all under the influence of the modes of material nature, and the seeming illness of the spiritual master is actually a pastime to allow the disciples and the people in general to develop more intense love for the spiritual master, to help solidify their commitment and lifelong dedication to serve the spiritual master with unbroken enthusiasm, determination, and resolve after the spiritual master departs this planet to enact the Lord's mission by the Lord's will in a different place. So one Western woman in her middle ages, well-dressed and seeming of like good stature and aristocracy, she questioned Prabhupada in a challenging way. You know, what good will your movement, or can your movement do for the suffering of the people, meaning there's people who are like hungry and they're displaced by war and so many external things, which under a proper God-conscious government would never ever happen. You read the stories of Lord Ramachandra. Everyone had plenty. There wasn't even death for those who didn't wish to die. People had the power to control their own death. Lord Ramachandra's reign, for example. And Prabhupada's reply, you think he would have like tried to soften the, try to appeal to her good sentiments of wanting to do good, but, you know, like more soft and cautious. Prabhupada said, what good is your so-called compassion? You don't know what compassion is. Your compassion is like blowing air on a boil. A boil is very, very painful. It's filled with pus and disease, and if left unattended, that could spread to the rest of the body, and in some cases even necessitating amputation or worse, even coma or death. Our movement is meant to cut the boil. You cut the boil, there might be temporary pain, there might be temporary inconvenience in renouncing or curtailing or trying to regulate or control your wayward material desires, your lust, your greed, etc. But once the boil is cut off, then very quickly good health returns. So to point out to people the root cause of their suffering, which is their neglect of their eternal relationship with the personality of Godhead, that's real compassion. And that is the topmost welfare work, and that is the ultimate need in human society for men and women who have that conviction. Such men and women are called devotees of the Lord, is to go forth into human society in very large numbers and distribute this knowledge of one's eternal relationship with Krishna, what this life is all about, and what we should be doing while we're here. Prabhupada says very simply also in this third canto, no one has anything else to do except render devotional service to the Lord. And that is actually our ultimate pleasure. But people do not know this. Everyone must be educated in Vishnu worship and engaged in the devotional service of Rishikesh, the owner of the senses. The conditioned souls are meant not to satisfy their mortal senses, but to satisfy the senses of Rishikesh, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is the purpose of the complete administrative system. One who knows this secret, as disclosed here in the version of Brahma, is the perfect administrative head. One who does not know this is a show bottle administrator. By training the citizens in devotional service of the Lord, the head of a state can be free in his responsibility. Otherwise, he will fail in his onerous duty. In other words, this describes the unqualified leader, improperly motivated. As Prabhupada says, they capture the high post by hook or by crook. It's described in the Manu Samhita that the representative leader, he accepts 1/6 the karma of every single one of the citizens. So you better make sure that all the citizens are performing proper activities, and then you will get the 1/6 result. Good. But if they're all performing sinful activities, along with your own sinful activities, that weight will drown you in the ocean of material existence. When Maharaj Prithu, we will read coming in the 4th canto, was addressing his citizens, he was praising them for engaging themselves properly in their varnashram duties and responsibilities, thus Haritoshanam, worshiping the Lord, because by that, Maharaj Prithu said, you've done a great favor for me in this life, and this will help me at the time of my death. There is no other alternative in the discharge of administrative duty. Any questions or comments? So, today is the 108th anniversary of the disappearance day of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. And we have discovered a very nice presentation by His Holiness Giriraj Swami, and we would like to read that. It's a combination of the direct biography and the glories of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and also, as Giriraj Swami is one of the early disciples in the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, he was perhaps the first and the best bhakta that came from, as Srila Satsvarup Maharaj said, Beantown, Boston. Boston's called Beantown because it used to be the capital for making baked beans in the United States 100 or more years ago. He called it a rough town. You know, there's, for so many reasons, not a very nice town. So, and of course, when Prabhupada went to India in 1970 with his World Sankirtan party, he wanted the temples, which I think there were only 15 or 18 at the time, to send their best devotee. So, reluctantly and sadly, they kissed Giriraj Swami goodbye, and he went and joined Prabhupada in India, and later he became so instrumental in fulfilling Prabhupada's dream to let there be a temple. I'll build you a temple, that wonderful book we can all read about the Juhu project, Bombay, and there's so much more in there about Srila Prabhupada's activities in India, and also his departure from this world, and Giriraj Swami's very special relationship with Srila Prabhupada. So here he describes the place of Bhaktivinoda Thakur in ISKCON and the history of his, how Srila Prabhupada introduced the understanding of Bhaktivinoda Thakur in the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Today we are observing the disappearance day of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Sri Gadadhar Pandit. I first learned of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur when I visited the Boston Temple. At that time, there were only 2 published books in ISKCON, the abridged edition of the Bhagavad Gita as it is, published by Macmillan, and the teachings of Lord Chaitanya, published by ISKCON. And at the front of Teachings of Lord Chaitanya was a series of very dignified black and white photographs of Srila Prabhupada, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Srila Gaurkishore Das Babaji, and Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Under the photograph of Bhaktivinoda Thakur was a caption, "The pioneer of the program for benedicting the entire world with Krishna consciousness by the instructions of Lord Chaitanya." I understood from the caption that Srila Prabhupada was continuing the work of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and that we were able to come in touch with Krishna consciousness in part because of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. As the years passed and I came to learn more about Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, I began to see more and more how the Krishna consciousness movement brought by Srila Prabhupada to the West and expanded throughout the world was a continuation of the work of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur and the result of his desire. So we were all indebted to Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and we are intimately connected with him through parampara. Lord Chaitanya predicted, Pritiviti achayakti yata nagaradi gram sarvatra prachar habi mora nam. In every town and village of every country of the world, my name, Krishna's name, will be heard. Although Lord Chaitanya made this prediction more than 500 years ago, even his followers have sometimes been bewildered about how it would be fulfilled. Some of them have even thought the prediction was metaphorical or abstract. But Bhaktivinoda Thakur had faith in the order and in the desire of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and through his books he began the work of spreading Krishna consciousness and the holy name of Krishna throughout the world in particular. In 1896, the year of Srila Prabhupada's birth, he wrote a book called Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, His Life and Precepts, and distributed to libraries worldwide. Actually, Srila Prabhupada, to renew his United States residency, we have the fingerprints of Srila Prabhupada there from this time, 1968, in Prabhupada's museum. He went to Montreal, and I think it was Pradyumna in particular who found this book in the McGill University Library. And when it was shown to Srila Prabhupada, Prabhupada was extremely happy and delighted. Bhaktivinoda Thakur passed on his desire, which was Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's desire, to his son, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, though he never left India, passed on the same desire to his disciples. In particular, he gave Srila Prabhupada the order to preach Krishna consciousness in the English language, which even then was the universal language in the Western world and in the whole world. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur predicted, very soon, these are his direct words, the unparalleled path of Hari Nam Sankirtan will be propagated all over the world. He foresaw the day when Vaishnavas from all over the world would come to Mayapur and chant Jai Sachinandan together with the Bengali Vaishnavas, Gaudiya Vaishnavas. And Srila Prabhupada was the one who acted to fulfill the desire and prediction of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Again, his direct words. Oh, for that day when the fortunate English, French, Russian, German, and American people will take up banners, mridangas, and cartels and raise kirtan through their streets and towns. When will that day come? Oh, for that day when the fair-skinned men from their side chanting Jai Sachinandan, Ki Jai, will extend their arms and embracing devotees of our country come from our side, treat us with brotherly feelings. When will that day be? This is at the time of the British Raj, where you had, racist, bigoted people or poets like Rudyard Kipling writing ridiculous poems called The White Man's Burden. You can look it up. At such a time. So, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur had a house in Gojum Dweep across the Jalangi River from Mayapur, and he used to chant on his balcony there. One day he looked across the river and had a vision of an effulgent city with a wonderful temple, an Adbhut Mandir at its center. He desired that this wonderful temple and splendorous city should come into existence. And here too, Srila Prabhupada has engaged his followers to fulfill the prediction and desire of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Sri Nityananda Prabhu. Now here is a quote by Lord Nityananda from the Navadvip Mahatmya. Eka Adbhuta Mandir A Habe Prakash Gorangera Nitya Seva Habe Bikash. An astounding temple will appear and will engage the entire world in the eternal service of Lord Chaitanya. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur also discovered the actual birthplace of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in Mayapur. Over centuries of the Ganges flooding and changing course, the location of Mayapur and birthplace of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was lost. Bhaktivinoda Thakur studied old maps and consulted different local people and ultimately determined the actual location. And that with the confirmation of the Mukta Purush Siddha Baba Mahabhagavat Sri Jagannath Das Babaji. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur carried forward the idea of the Vedic city in Mayapur, and he had some of his household disciples build small houses there. But again, it was really Srila Prabhupada who carried the desire of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur forward to the point where there is now a budding metropolis in Mayapur. That's actually predicted too in Navadvip Dham Mahatmya. You can hear the memoir of Sri Jananivas Prabhu on the 1972 film footage of the establishment of Mayapur in the following Srila Prabhupada DVDs of Yadubar and Vishaka. He said that a whole city and dwellings will pop up all over the place. And he's describing how in 1972, no one came to Mayapur. The only structure there, which is now the Bhajan Kutir at the front of the property, that was the only building there. And it just seemed unbelievable that such a thing, but now a whole city is rising up. Srila Prabhupada had to struggle to get some land in Mayapur. Eventually, it was Tamal Krishna Goswami who was able to secure the purchase of the land. Then Srila Prabhupada designed or gave the basic idea for the first building to be constructed and brought the drawings with him from London to Calcutta. But there had been flooding in Mayapur, and sometimes the flooding there is very severe. Therefore, although Srila Prabhupada was so enthusiastic about the project and had struggled so hard to get the land in Mayapur and had personally brought the plans for the first building there, still, right when we were at the peak of our enthusiasm, he raised the question, what will happen if the Ganges floods? What will happen to the temple, to the project? He suggested that we build the temple in Mayapur and discuss different arguments for and against his suggestion. Then he presented the idea that we should build the temple at Brinagar, the birthplace of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. We were completely bewildered, and when Srila Prabhupada argued so strongly that we should build the temple at Brinagar because it would be safe from the floods there, we were swayed by his divine grace's argument. But in the end, he brought us back to the conclusion that we should go ahead with the project in Mayapur. In Prabhupada's words, if you build this temple, he said, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur will personally come and take you all back to Godhead. So that is both Srila Prabhupada's and Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur's desire that we build a wonderful temple and go back to Godhead. And by following in Srila Prabhupada's footsteps, we are also following in the footsteps of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Another important program of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur was Nam Hata. In fact, before Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur built his house in Gojuma Dweep, he built a Bhajan Kutir near the site of the house in Surabi Kunj, which is the original place where the Nam Hatha was started by Nityananda Prabhu. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur got his inspiration for the Nam Hatha there. The basic idea of the Nam Hatha is that Grihastha Vaishnavas, householder devotees, preach. By definition, householders will usually have a spouse, children, work, and a home, but they should still preach. They should use all of their spare time to preach. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur himself was a householder for many years, and he would lead his householder devotees through the streets performing Sankirtan, and then they would hold festivals, large gatherings where Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur would preach Bhagavad Dharma and the glories of the holy name. He published a book, Sri Godruma Kalpatavi, about his Nam Hatha program, which included reports of some of his preaching events. The Harinam Sankirtan and Bhagavad Dharma discourses were ecstatic, and the Nam Hatha was spreading very nicely. During Srila Prabhupada's presence, His Holiness Jai Pataka Swami and other ISKCON devotees revived the Nam Hatha in Bengal and Orissa, and now it is spread all around the world. So, this is lengthy, but I'll read just a little more. Somehow, with so many duties and responsibilities and so many children, he had 11 children. The fourth son was Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. This is very exemplary. Husband and wife are always praying to have an exemplary children, saintly children. So he, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, understanding his responsibility to extend the mission of Lord Chaitanya at a time when things were very, very difficult for so many reasons. He said, "It is not within my power to restore your teachings to their pure state single-handedly. You must send me someone from your personal staff." Sometimes he said entourage. And such a personality is understood to be a ray of Vishnu. So such an extraordinary personality took birth as his one of his sons. And immediately, even when he was born, his umbilical cord was wrapped around his neck like a Brahmin thread. This is an amazing sign. This is very rarely, if ever, seen. And as a 4-month-old infant, the cart of Jagannath stopped in front of Bhaktivinoda Thakur's house and could not be moved until the child was brought out, a 4-month-old baby, and exactly at the time that the child was brought before the cart of Jagannath, the flower garland of Jagannath fell down and completely circled Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. At the age of 4, he, the pastime of taking a mango from the kitchen, which had not been yet duly offered to the household deity, and Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur very mildly admonished him, this has not been offered, you should not have taken it. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, as a 4-year-old, took this so seriously that he made a lifelong vow that I will never again take mango. So to never again take mango in Bengal, India, that's quite a vow. And even when he was revered spiritual master, well into his late 50s and early 60s, his disciples would offer him mango. He said, "No, I cannot take. I am an offender." At the age of 7, he had memorized all 700 verses of the Bhagavad Gita and could speak them fluently and even give dissertation. Such a personality. So we can take inspiration from him and keep in our minds and hearts his glorious example, that even in our various demanding positions, we can do more and more for Krishna and for the disciplic succession, for Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur and our spiritual master. So I would like to read, this is a very exalted literature. It is the last writing of Bhaktivinoda Thakur in 1907. At that time he took Babaji Vesh, and on the order of Lord Jagannath, he took up residence on the seashore at Jagannath Puri, and his instruction was simply to chant Harinam continuously. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur had worked very hard and had felt some despondency towards the end of his life. That is a whole, we don't have time to describe the reason, but the Lord appeared to him, Lord Jagannath appeared to him. No, actually it was Lord Chaitanya. The Lord in his form of Lord Chaitanya said, "O exalted devotee, you please go to the seashore where I personally entombed my beloved Haridas, and you simply chant the holy name, because by your chanting you will deliver the entire world." So if such a personality is given the order to simply chant the holy name, and such a person is present on the planet, the entire planet is being upheld and kept in a very exalted position. Lord Chaitanya performed the last rites of Haridas Thakur, who personally requested the Lord permission to depart the planet before he, Lord Chaitanya, did. And Lord Chaitanya granted that permission. And his last wish was to see the face of Lord Chaitanya at his last breathing. Lord Chaitanya did that. He would visit Haridas Thakur on a regular daily basis. That place is a very exalted place. Those of you who have the opportunity to visit Jagannath Puri sometime in your life, the place is called Siddha Bakul, the place of bhajan of Haridas Thakur. And it was also the place where Rupa and Sanatana Goswami were given shelter when their visits to see Lord Chaitanya, where they were given instruction and empowerment to proceed to Vrindavan, to excavate Vrindavan's lost glories, and write the most important Vaishnava scriptures, such as Nectar of Devotion and other Brihad Bhagavatam Rita. So at the conclusion, Lord Chaitanya gave a blessing and benediction to all the devotees who were present. Anyone who has seen the passing of Haridas Thakur, anyone who has chanted and danced here, anyone who has offered sand on the body of Haridas Thakur, and anyone who has taken prasadam here will receive the favor of Krishna very soon. Haridas Thakur was the crown jewel on the head of this world. Without him, the world is bereft of its valuable jewel. Bhanabhata has a story. He was in Mayapur in 1976. They were preparing what is now called the Chakra building, the long building, for influx of many visiting devotees, and he was struggling as the temple commander to get it done. And there was one devotee, he'd come from America early, and he was strong-bodied, good stature, physically powerful devotee, and he had asked him to help. And his response, "No, Prabhu, I'm simply here to chant Hare Krishna." And he went off into the banana patch and was just chanting Hare Krishna. And so Bhanabhata was very upset, and he went to see Srila Prabhupada, and Srila Prabhupada, at the time he came into his room, was just sitting chanting japa. Not early in the morning, this is in the daytime, so it was like more rounds, extra rounds. And Bhanabhata just kind of blurts out the story, and of course, this devotee going off to chant in the banana patch when he should have helped, that was wrong. But this is how Prabhupada answered or responded to Bhagavatam at the time. He said, so, you don't think chanting Hare Krishna is service? It is the ultimate service. And Bhagavatam was just like reduced to like, yes, Srila Prabhupada paid obeisances, and that was the end of that. So, of course, how important is the chanting of Hare Krishna, but it has to be rendered, or the license to simply chant Hare Krishna continuously as your main service is only for the most qualified and personally selected devotees to do so. So we just brought forth this example. If the neophyte is not engaged in service that engages his body and senses, then he will simply sleep soundly and ultimately fall prey to thinking of so many unpurified material desires. So, this is Sva Niyama Dodasakam, 12 verses of my self-imposed regulative principles. The last work, written work of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. And he subtitles it, Fundamental Guidelines for the Performance of One's Personal Bhajan Intended for Daily Chanting and Meditation. This final work was composed by Bhaktivinoda Thakur just before his total seclusion at the beachfront Bhajan Kutir at Jagannath Puri. And each of the 12 verses has a title. Verse 1, The Objects of Devotion, Birth After Birth. No matter whenever and wherever I happen to take my birth, let my loving affection and attachment remain unshaken throughout each and every lifetime for the following things. For my divine spiritual master, for Sri Gauranga, for the detailed topics of pure devotional service and the methods of its execution, as personally instructed by him. For the holy places of pilgrimage, such as Sri Navadvip, Sri Kshetra, that's another name for Jagannath Puri, Sri Kshetra Dham, Sri Vrindavan, etc., which are all blooming with divine sanctity due to his performance of wonderful pastimes therein. For the Diksha mantra bestowed upon me by the divine grace of my spiritual master, for the holy name of Sri Hari, for the most beloved eternal associates of the Lord, for the sacred days of celebration throughout the year, such as Sri Akadasi, Janmastami, Radhastami, and the disappearance days of the great Vaishnavacharyas, etc. For the Lord's dearmost devotees who strictly follow in the sacred footsteps of Srila Rupa Goswami, and for the holy scriptures narrated by Srila Shukadeva Goswami, such as the Srimad Bhagavatam, etc. 2. The internal identity of Lord Chaitanya, the eternal guide. This is a very ecstatic, elevated, and amazing, wonderful meditation on Lord Chaitanya and Radha Govinda simultaneously. Listen carefully. The Supreme Lord Sri Krishna is the personified abode of all divinely ecstatic, mellow tastes. And Sri Radhika is the topmost abode of all his divinely potent energies. Indeed, she is the personified form of the highest mellow of love in separation. Within the forest of Brinda, which is gloriously rich in the all-pervading treasure of the sweetest Madhurya Ras, this Lord Sri Krishna is continuously enjoying as he makes Sri Radhika happy by his loving service rendered to her 24 hours a day. Srila Prabhupada resided in the place Seva Kunj. Whose seva? And to whom? The Supreme Lord Krishna Chandra's seva to Srimati Radharani. Behind Radha Damodar is Shringar Bhat, also Nityananda Bhat. Lord Nityananda stayed there when he visited Vrindavan, and it's a place where Krishna performed very, very intimate, direct services to Srimati Radharani. So Prabhupada said this is the hub, the inner core of the spiritual world, and this is where the temple of Radha Damodar, the place of gathering of the Goswamis, where Srila Prabhupada was brought to get complete fortified inspiration, protection, and empowerment to write the Srimad Bhagavatam and come to the United States of America, starting Baladev Vidyabhushan, Satsvarup Maharaj's disciple, who did many of the interviews for the Srila Prabhupada Leela Amrita, particularly planting the seed here in the volume describing the emergence of the movement here in New York, said that 26 Second Avenue, how Prabhupada administered there, is Krishna Consciousness 101. Then anyone who wants to spread Krishna consciousness anywhere in the world should follow this exact formula, and they're guaranteed to be successful. And Prabhupada said, all the inspiration that I received was from residing at the temple of Radha Damodar in Seva Kunj. As he makes Sri Radhika happy by his loving service rendered to her 24 hours a day. This very same Lord Krishna is exactly identical to the son of Mother Sachi, who eternally lives simultaneously yet separately in Gauda Desh as the instructor of the process for rendering his own devotional service. May this Sri Sachinandan become my supreme master and guide, and may he always appear to me just to lead me on the proper devotional path, birth after birth after birth. Verse 3, rejection of things unfavorable for Sri Radha and Krishna's eternal service. Let no form of so-called renunciation or asceticism become fit for my acceptance if it does not give rise to the continual expansion of my eternal serving mood of loving devotion. And let no form of so-called knowledge or intellectual cultivation appeal to me at all if it does not admit the reality of eternal individuality shared by the Lord and his devotees during their everlasting daily pastime. So if any knowledge or intellectual cultivation does not help us to understand our eternal individuality on the perfectional stage meant to engage with the Lord in his eternal loving daily pastimes, such so-called knowledge and intellectualism is as rejectable as stool and garbage in the street, or worse, poison. I have no desire at all for practicing any branch of the eightfold yoga process, for none of them, and here's the reason why, contain any scope for enjoying the daily pleasure of serving Lord Hari, such as his confidential worship does. They fall down from their state of imagined superiority because of having no locus standi in the devotional service to your lotus feet, which is the sweetest nectar, the nectar for which we are always anxious. Rather, may I render profuse, uninterrupted, confidential service 24 hours a day to Sri Radha and Krishna for all of time to come, because such service is both the means as well as the end simultaneously. 4. Where to live and where not to live. May I continuously reside in a small, lonely cottage at the base of a desire tree in the most holy abode of Sri Navadvip Dham, which is sanctified by the lotus feet of Sri Sachi Nandan. Such a bhajan kutir is perfectly suitable for constant remembrance of and service to the divine daily sports that are always present in Sri Brajadam. Indeed, in contrast to this, I will never live in any other place, even if it is hankered for with great enthusiasm by the most wise sages and demigods of all sorts. Like here in New York City, I live on the Upper East Side. Wow. Or we even pat ourselves on the back here that living on Skimmerhorn Street is much more respectable than it was 40 years ago. Who was here at that time? Me! I can say so. Safer too. As far as all other places in this world are concerned, whether opulent palaces or temples, whether possessing vast riches or of enormous wealth or princely kingdoms and property, all such places cannot attract me as much as my modest bhajan kutir in Sri Navadvip Dham does. Home is where the heart is, the pure heart. Wherever you are, that is Vrindavan. The pure devotee can convert and create the Vrindavan atmosphere anywhere in the world by his pure and empowered devotional activities. There's a very beautiful book that Varshana Maharaj, actually Madri in New Vrindavan, I think she's mainly responsible for that, color guide to New Vrindavan, picture guide. It's Majesty, Beauty, and Grace, I think it's called. Everyone should see this book. As quotes from Raghunath Das Goswami's Stavavali, Vrindavan Mahimamrita, Prabodhananda Saraswati, the vision of His Holiness Varshana Maharaj that Palace Road, McCreary's Ridge in wild, wonderful West Virginia is non-different than the eternal Vrindavan Dham is simply amazing. And this is showing the glory of Srila Prabhupada, who envisioned New Vrindavan to fulfill one of the 7 main purposes of ISKCON, to erect a holy place of a holy place of pastimes in the West, dedicated to the pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So they're working very hard there to physically create, but those who are somewhat introspective and sincere, they can feel that presence there in New Vrindavan. Five, the real principle of Dharma, which is devoid of designations. I have no attachment at all to any of the caste divisions of society such as Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, or Sudra, and I certainly do not identify with any order of life such as Brahmacharya, Grihastha, Vanaprastha, or Sannyas. I have no fondness or respect at all for the so-called piety of religiosity or even for the so-called impiety of sinful life in this world, not even the slightest regard. Instead, I truly desire whatever is practically required just to maintain this material body in order to facilitate my performance of pure devotional service. This is the actual righteousness that I will hope for as long as this material body continues to exist. 6, favorable, authorized practices and devotional qualities. My austere vow is constant devotion to the lotus feet of Sri Hari. In order to execute that vow, I have accepted the following qualities by my own endeavor. I practice great humility in my dealings with everyone. I try to keep simplicity and purity prominent in all of my practical arrangements. I maintained extreme tolerance in all types of favorable or unfavorable circumstances. I offer all respect unto others, regardless of who they are. I feel genuine compassion for all living entities and act accordingly. Hare Krishna, thank you. We're indulging ourselves because we're not having breakfast today, so we're going forward. There are many transcendental activities which are recommended by the great devotees who are fixed up in unalloyed devotional service to the lotus feet of Sriman Mahaprabhu. And these can be found described in the books that are full of the imperishable character and pastimes of Mahaprabhu Sri Krishna Chaitanya. Only such transcendently nectarian activities being recommended by great devotees and practiced by Lord Chaitanya himself are indeed my own. 7. Repulsion from those things which are disconnected from Sri Radhika. I have no attraction for living in Vaikuntha, that part of the spiritual sky presided over by Sri Lakshmi Narayan, nor do I desire the useless activities of gross sense gratification available in this material world. I will never cherish the desire for attaining the divine bliss of impersonalistic liberation, even for a second. Furthermore, there are many transcendental pastimes of Sri Hari that may be very purifying for all conditioned souls, yet such pastimes will never ever give me any real happiness at all. This is because such pastimes are quite different from the blissful ecstasies of Braja consciousness, being completely devoid of any relationship with Sri Radhika, who is the one and only fountainhead of pure joy. Verse 8. Renunciation of all kinds of bad association. I now disown my wife, my daughters, my sons, my mother, and all my friends if they have no genuine attachment for Lord Hari, for his devotees, or for his devotional service. It is definitely a great sin even to accept food grains prepared by such non-devotional materialistic sense gratifiers. This is why we're very careful not to eat grains cooked by non-devotees. If I were to remain in the company of such persons, then how will the eternal perfection of my Hari Bhajan ever come about? 9. Avoidance of so-called devotees who proudly reject Sri Radhika. There are certain persons who appear to be very advanced in devotion. Indeed, to increase their service to the Lord, they have long since rejected the evil company of those who are completely blinded by faulty arguments arising from so-called intellectual logic, those who are madly addicted to the fleeting pleasures of the dull material body, those who are averse to and envious of Lord Sri Krishna, and those who are very fond of the inferior, distasteful concept of liberation as it is cherished by the impersonalists. So there's a class of people who have rejected all of these things. Sounds good, right? They have thus favorably avoided all kinds of bad association, yet it is seen that such persons worship Lord Govinda without Srimati Radharani being present. This just shows that they are actually puffed up with excessive pride and a conceited arrogance directed against Sri Radhika, who is herself the best worshipper of Govinda. Therefore, I will never go anywhere near such so-called devotees, even for a second. This is my strict vow. 10. How to live simply and perform Braj Bhajan until death. Passing my life in a simple, practical way, eating only prasad food grains and milk products, the remnants of the Supreme Lord, His mercy. Wearing only prasad cloth that was offered to the deity, using only the pots and utensils sanctified by the Lord's exclusive service. I will thus remain completely aloof from material sense gratification. Living by the side of Sri Radhakund, her very own abode, worshiping the divine couple with a blissful mind, the time will come for me to die. At the soles of the devotees' lotus feet, who are themselves serving the lotus feet of the divine couple, I will thus give up my body. Verse 11. How to worship the lotus feet of Sri Radhika's pure devotee. There is a class of pure devotee who is completely expert and experienced in following all the instructions of Sri Sachidananda. Such a devotee incessantly worships Srimati Radharani exclusively, who is indeed the most worshipful personality, and who is deeply absorbed every day in relishing the divine mellows of Sri Krishna's association. The pure devotee of this caliber definitely performs his confidential worship wholeheartedly and with the exclusive surrender unto Sri Radhika. with exclusive surrender. Thus he always lives in Sri Braj Mandal. I shall take the nectarian water that has washed the lotus feet of such a devotee and carry it on my head. Drinking it with great joy and with a devout heart, I will then happily offer my full prostrations upon the ground in the nicest, most perfect way that I possibly can. This will indeed be my routine each and every day. Verse 12, the last verse. Firm determination to transcend Maya by following this stava. As a spirit soul, my natural tendency is to be eternally situated in the loving devotional service of Lord Hari. However, due to the strong power and influence of the Lord's Mahamaya, I have somehow plunged deeply into the fathomless ocean of material sorrow and grief. I shall transcend this world of Maya and go to the spiritual world only by faithfully following these self-imposed vows every day. And the only way I will get the strength to follow these vows is by attaining the mercy of all the Vaishnava devotees of the Lord. May their causeless mercy and soft-hearted compassion, which wards off all illusion, become my exclusive friend and guide for all of time everlasting. Valshruti, the benediction of eternal service gained by reading this stava. This stava, named Sva Niyama Vidasakam, was written by someone to adjust and regulate his own personal mode of performing bhajan. If any other devotee happens to chant this stava with a very special quality of resolute faith, fully offering his mind unto the supreme beautiful forms of the divine couple, Sri Sri Radha Govinda, his most dear possession, or to the divine beauty of their deity form, or to the beauty or deity of Sri Gaurasundar, the combined form of Sri Sri Radha Govinda, or to Srila Rupa Goswami, the dear most beloved devotee of Sri Sri Radha Govinda and Sri Gaurasundar, then that fortunate reader definitely attains his own place of eternal residence in Sri Brajadam, always following behind his own Manjari Guru in his own spiritual body of a Manjari also. He finally renders all kinds of variegated eternal services for the exclusive worship of Sri Sri Radha and Krishna. Thus ends Sri Niyama Dvadasakam by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, his last writing. Srila Gadadhar Pandit, there are many pastimes you can read in the Chaitanya Charitamrita and other authorized biographical books. I think we've run out of time. We encourage everyone to read and hear the glories of Gadadhar Pandit Prabhu too, also on this day. Hare Krishna. Is there a plan to have a Pushpanjali, or we don't have the wherewithal to? Huh? Will Arjuna Nanda? This easel could be raised up in the picture of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, or a table with a tablecloth. And so we pray to Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur and to Sri Gadadhar Pandit Prabhu for their mercy, that we can be the best devotees we possibly can be for the service of Srila Prabhupada and our initiating spiritual masters, and continue and take very seriously the responsibility, as here we are in material bodies and we're living, we are the contemporary, we are the present Bhutale on this earth planet. So let us be the puppets and hands and legs and senses for these great devotees to execute and extend their will to benedict the world with the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur ki, Shri Gadadhar Pandit ki, Shri Radha Govinda ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Nitai Gaur Premanandi Haribo. Hare Krishna.